What's going on, Dolphins fans? It's Connor from the Dolphins Dive, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about the defensive line and their training camp battles ahead of this 2023 training camp. Now, in my opinion, this is one of the best units on the entire roster.
This is an elite unit.
I completely agree, and honestly, I'm very excited to break down this entire group. Now, I'm doing defensive line. I'm going to leave out outside linebackers, who I also consider on the defensive line, but I also need to keep the linebackers video interesting, and it would just be inside linebackers, which is a very small position group. So I'm just going to be talking about the interior defensive line for the most part. So I'm going to go over the players currently on the roster. Obviously, at the top of that list is Christian Wilkins. Pay that man. Next on the list is Zach Sealer, Raekwon Davis, Jalen Twyman, whose birthday is today, happy birthday, Brandon Peely, Anthony Montalvo, Josiah Bronson, Randy Charlton, and Emmanuel Ogbah. So a lot of the big names that we are all aware of, and then a lot of lesser known names who are going to be fighting to make this roster and are fighting an uphill battle, to say the least. So in my opinion, a lot of who is going to make this roster from this group is already determined, in my opinion. Last year, the Dolphins kept 6 defensive linemen, including like a player like Ogbah. And I wanted to look back at Vic Fangio's years as well to see usually how their roster construction is. And his last time as the Broncos head coach, they also kept 6 defensive linemen on their roster. So I think that's a fair number to assume who we're going to keep. Now, obviously, Christian Wilkins is staying on the roster. Zach Sealer is staying on the roster. And unless he's traded for, I highly doubt he's cut. Emmanuel Ogbah will also be on the roster, as well as Raekwon Davis. So I think 4 of those 6 spots are already locked up. I don't think anybody's going to beat those guys out. So I think it comes down to 2 roster spots are up for grabs between the remaining players, who's Jalen Twyman, who's going into his second year. He's hopped around a couple teams. He was on our practice squad last year. I think he started or played Week 17 against the Patriots for us. Brandon Peely, who's from USC, has some relations with our defensive line coach, Austin Clark, but he's obviously an undrafted free agent. Anthony Montalvo, who's also UDFA. Josiah Bronson, who's entering year 3. He's hopped around, could potentially make a push. I mean, he's got more experience than some of these undrafted free agents, so maybe he shines. Josiah Bronson, who actually I think I might have just said. I did. And then Randy Charlton, who's also an undrafted free agent, more of a defensive end kind of build like Emmanuel Ogbah. So I think there's 2 roster spots between those players. And also, I think the Dolphins sign a veteran guy either ahead of training camp or towards the end of training camp. A lot of what veterans are doing nowadays is they wait for training camp to happen, wait for these people to get nicked up, see opportunities, and then get signed. And some players, I think the Dolphins without a doubt are going to sign a veteran guy. I think some names to look out for are Shelby Harris or Akeem Hicks. Obviously have some familiarity with Vic Fangio. I think if they sign a player like that, they're locked to make the roster. So those 2 spots that are open might be cut down to 1 if a veteran is signed. So between Twyman, Peely, Montalvo, Bronson, and Charlton, there's no real competition for a starting position. It's more so competition to make the roster. And obviously, like the coaches will say, every position is up for grabs. I just think if we can all project like we all know how to project, Christian Wilkins is going to be a starter. Zach Sealer is going to be a starter. Raekwon Davis will be our starting nose tackle. But obviously, things happen. Maybe a guy absolutely turns into a god or somebody gets injured. So that's what we're going to break down. So we know what the competition's down to. There's 2 spots open. I think 1 gets filled by a veteran that isn't currently on the roster, and the last one is a absolute battle between the 5 remaining players that's up for grabs. So, like I said, I think 6 players get kept. Raekwon Davis at nose tackle. Christian Wilkins, Zach Sealer obviously make it. Emmanuel Ogbah obviously makes it. And a veteran defensive lineman is going to make it, albeit Shelby Harris, Akeem Hicks, another kind of guy. So, in my opinion, the last guy to make the roster comes down to 2 players. In my opinion, I'm not going to act like I know these guys inside out. I haven't watched their film or anything, so I'm quite ignorant. But just based off my feel, it depends on who the veteran defensive lineman is. If they go out and sign a veteran nose tackle to help back up Raekwon or just rotate in and out with him, like we did last year with John Jenkins, who's always solid for us. If they go sign a John Jenkins type player, or Akeem Hicks is even big enough to play nose tackle, I think Jalen Twyman will make the team. But if the Dolphins are in need of a bigger guy to fill the nose tackle role in case Raekwon goes down to rotate with Raekwon, I think Brandon Pilley, the guy out of USC with a relationship with Austin Clark, will make this roster. That's how I see this coming down to. So I think a veteran defensive lineman makes a roster. If they're a nose tackle build, Jalen Twyman makes the roster. If they're not a nose tackle build, Brandon Pilley makes the roster. And obviously, I think some of these guys will end up on the practice squad. Like I said, I'm rooting. If there's a UDFA and he turns into an absolute stud for us, I'd be so happy to be wrong about this list. It's just based off the knowledge I currently have and what I know. I haven't seen these guys at training camp or anything. So that's my analysis. Comment down below, though. Who do you see making that last roster spot? Do you see it being Twyman, Pilley, Bronson, Charlton, Montalvo? I want to hear your prediction ahead of this upcoming training camp. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Like and subscribe to help the channel grow. It means a lot to me. Until next time, I'll catch y'all.